Hey guys, if you've seen one of my amaryllis videos, you know just how much I love flowering houseplants. And take a look at my huge Clivia plant. It has started to bloom and flower. Amaryllis, along with some other flowering houseplants, can be a bit confusing because they do have a dormancy period and do need some special care. They aren't too complicated. You just need to understand some of the special care instructions. Well, the fire lily or Clivia is definitely another favorite of mine. I've had this plant for some time now, and as you can see, it is finally coming into bloom. Clivia are native to South Africa, of course, and they boast this amazing green foliage. Their flowers and blooms are typically orange and a little hint of yellow. This is the most common color for the flowers. I do believe that there are some other varieties that exist, maybe in reds and some more yellows. I'll be sharing all of the crucial care tips along with how to care for these plants pre, during, and post dormancy. Thanks for checking out this video. I'm Tyler, and if you like what you're seeing or you find this video to be useful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Or better yet, you can subscribe to my channel. Clivia go dormant from about October to February, early March. And they do, as I explained, bloom in early or mid-springtime. There are a few things that you can do and also things you can look out for on your Clivia plant to know whether or not they will bloom. And I'll be covering all of that as well. To ensure the best flowers and blooms in early spring, there are definitely a few things you should be considering, and let's go over those things now. First, these plants love to be root bound, and actually the more root bound they are, the more likely you are to encourage your plant to bloom. And I say plant, but if you take a look at what I have potted up here, it's actually more than just one. There's several, which also helps have more roots and encourages root bound, therefore more blooms and hopefully more flowers. Also, it's important to note that individual Clivia plants need to have a certain number of leaves on them before they will bloom and have flowers. So if you have a freshly sprouted Clivia plant with, 4, 5, 6 leaves, then the likelihood of that flowering and blooming is probably pretty low. And lastly, the plant has had to have gone wow, I can speak English very well. The plant has had to have been dormant in order to bloom and flower. All right, so let me tell you how dormancy works and what you need to do. So from about October to February, you're gonna want to keep your Clivia plant in a dry, cool, bright place. For me, that's in my basement near a window. Now, the most important thing you're gonna want to remember is when your plant is placed in that dry, cool, bright place, for me, like my basement, you do not, that's right, you do not want to water whatsoever your Clivia plant. Just let it be, just let it do its thing down there. You don't need to water it, you don't need to fuss over it. Just leave it alone basically and let it go dormant. Basically, when February and March rolls around, that's when you're gonna want to go take a look at the plant. As soon as you see any sign of new growth, that's basically gonna mean new foliage coming through from the center. that's when you can go ahead and start to water these plants. Now for the rest of the year, from early spring right up until around September, that's when you're going to want to water these. Now you can water them once the topsoil, about the first inch or so, is dry to the touch. Now you can go ahead and fertilize them in the spring and summertime when they're getting some light, and I'll get into the lighting in just a second. So go ahead and use a balanced diluted liquid fertilizer for these plants. And some folks do go ahead and use that sort of bloom booster fertilizer to encourage, obviously, more blooms and flowers. In terms of lighting, these plants do need some, keyword some, direct sunlight, but they also do need some shade as well. So ideally, these plants could be placed in a east or west window, and all that means is they're getting some early morning or late afternoon light, but then they are getting some respite and some shade throughout the course of the day. You know, we do our best to replicate what these plants would experience in their natural habitat. These obviously are from the forest floor, so that means that they do want that direct sun, but also shade as well. These natural conditions also dictate the type of soil mix that you should use and that work best for the Clivia plant, and that would be a sort of bark, peat, and perlite type mix. There are some other important crucial care tips that I can share with you guys, and I'm gonna share those right now. These plants do not like to be repotted, so this is not something that you're gonna wanna repot very often. And like I explained earlier, the more root bound they are, the better job you're doing basically at encouraging them to flower and bloom. That being said, when you do start to see roots popping up from the topsoil, that's probably a good indicator that you can go ahead and repot these plants. I now know and understand that the best time to repot these plants, if you do need to repot them, is after they have flowered. Unfortunately for me, that wasn't the case. I actually did end up repotting this plant a few months back, and that may be one of the reasons why this is blooming in early April and not a couple of weeks ago. One thing that's kind of convenient about the Clivia plant is that it follows kind of the exact opposite schedule or dormancy schedule as the amaryllis. So for me personally, I find that having both of these types of plants is something that really works well together, because you're kind of doing this trade-off when one's going into dormancy, the other's coming out, and it just kind of keeps you organized and kind of cycling through those plants that you, for me, are stored in my basement, but wherever that, you know, dry, cool places for you, by having both of these plants, it's just kind of like you've got this kind of little system going on, and it really works for me, and I love that. Share any questions or experiences you have with these plants in the comments down below. That's it for me. Miss you guys already. Oh yeah, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up or hit that subscribe button. Until the next one.